Welcome to Kinship Earth Connections. I'm your host, Lauren Archer. The video you're about to see was recorded live on May 4th, 2022. It's part of our ongoing event series featuring high-level influencers from our network. Kinship Earth is a nonprofit organization based on the living legacy of Susan Davis Mora, founder of KINS Innovation Networks, author of The Trojan Horse of Love, and affectionately known as the godmother of social investing. Susan founded over 40 KINS networks of heart-centered earth advocates and global changemakers. Kinship Earth is the next evolution of KINS Innovation Networks. The purpose of Kinship Earth Connections is to cross-pollinate information, innovation, and impact across multiple spheres of influence to co-create solutions, share best practices, and amplify our regenerative influence. So now let's join the meeting in progress and meet our special guest, Dr. Anneloes Smitsman. I first met Dr. Smitsman in a KINS circle, and when I researched her, I was blown away. Now, I love to shine the light on people who inspire admiration and celebration, the kindred spirits in this network who have dedicated their life's work to ushering in the regenerative renaissance. And I was so inspired by Anneloes' TED Talk, which was titled Our World in Crisis, How Love Can Provide a Solution. And her perspective is so clear, and it's a way of thinking about our relationship with the universe and our relationship with ourselves and the energy that we want to bring forward. She talked about this concept of the vector. It's the energy from which you come and how far within and both without you reach. And all of that is in context with her work as a systems theorist. So Dr. Smitsman is a futurist, a best-selling author, a scientist, facilitator, coach, systems architect, and founder and CEO of the EARTHwise Centre. Applying her master's degree in law and judicial political sciences, with her Ph.D. dissertation into the heart of systems change. Her thrivability blueprints are being implemented worldwide for developing economic, educational, and governance systems for regeneration. Dr. Smitsman is the co-author of the international bestseller, The Quest of Rose and Return of the Avatars, the first two books of the Future Humans trilogy with Dr. Jean Houston. She is the co-editor, together with Dr. Alexander Laszlo, of the New Paradigm in Politics book by the Laszlo Institute for New Paradigm Research, and the author of the Amazon bestseller, Love Letters from Mother Earth, The Promise of a New Beginning, as well as numerous peer-reviewed articles. And besides that, she is an amazing human being, and it is my great honor and privilege to welcome her to the stage. So Anneloes, please let us know, how did you get involved with the KINS community? And then just a little bit about where are we going with this architecture? Your topic today is architecting a regenerative world and future. So let's give Dr. Smitsman a Zoom applause. Thank you. And I'm going to spotlight you here.
Thank you all. Thank you, Lauren. Thank you so much for this, incredible introduction. And I'm so glad to be among so many of my friends here. Of course, most of us who are here, we know each other from putting our hands into the work, actually doing the work together, so I have about all of you here, and Susan and Walter, of course, my unconditional love for you both. And to answer your question, how did I come here? Well, that's Stephen, Stephen Gomes. Let me see, is Stephen there as well? I see, there you are. Yeah, now I see you. So I was helping Chief Phil Lane with setting up a course on creating talking circles based on indigenous wisdom principles, based on his 16 indigenous guiding principles for a regenerative and thrivable and sustainable world. And, has also helped him to create the trainings around that and all of the facilitation. And so this is where Stephen was. He was in that training for becoming a talking circle leader. The vision behind that, and I'm saying this because I think it's so aligned with the KINS principles here, is that right now, when we are going through times of tremendous change and a lot of different challenges, the power of community is more important than ever. And what's also really important is that there are ways in which we can hold space together, both for what is breaking down and what is dying and collapsing, as well as holding space for the future, and the future that is seeking to emerge through us, but which can still be very fragile. It needs our care, and it needs a common responsibility. And this is really in the talking circles. Indigenous people have known, these practices and have worked these ways for thousands and thousands of years, that in times of hardship, you come together and you help each other as a community. And you grieve together, you envision together, you dream together, you go through a rite of passage together. And so this is in that context. Stephen and I met each other. He said, you have to come to to the KINS network, and you got to meet Susan. And as soon as Susan and I were in the room together, we were like, as if we've known each other forever, right, Susan? I mean, I still remember those. Yes, exactly. kindred souls on a common mission. And when I then met Walter as well, and all Walter, you're doing as well with the farm. I love it so much. My grandfather, from my father's side, he was a farmer. He started as farming for vegetables and animals, and then became a really big farmer, actually, of flowers. So when I was a little girl, I remember going through all these greenhouses amongst all the roses and the gerberas, and learning all about flowers. Funny enough, when I was walking through these greenhouses, it was incredibly hot. And I felt like I'm walking in the tropics. Well, I've been living in Mauritius in the tropics since 2006. Little did I know as a little girl that I would actually go and live so long in the tropics. And all of those experiences, of course, have really influenced my thinking around architecting the systems, first of all, that make it possible to have a regenerative and thriving world and future. When I was also as a little girl, just to present some things, I was fascinated about building things. Now, my father, he's now retired, but he was a professor in ecological psychology, but also a part-time carpenter. So while, during the day, he'd be teaching and lecturing and working with experimental research for ecological psychology and child development, in his free time, he was building a boat. And I was always there to be giving him a helping hand. So I learned the love of wood and, to make things with your hands. And I loved creating things. So my first love for architecture really already came from that time, as well as I was always painting and drawing, looking at what can I see, but if we bring a slightly different perspective into that, what can happen then? And how could you see a potential future already in what you're architecting? Just like somebody who's working with stones may already see the sculpture inside the stone, and you just start to chip away on what is not that space. And that's how I experience futures. So futures for me connected to me always in my dreams in two ways. I saw when I was little the futures that we're living now of our climate crisis in ways I didn't understand, and ways that also frightened me. I would ask my parents, what is it about all these floods? And why are so many people in trouble? And what's happening to the animals? And say, well, Anneloes, you have a vivid imagination. And these are just dreams. Don't worry, they're just dreams. And I thought, they're not, no, they're too vivid to just be dreams. And at the same time, I experienced nature, just like this beautiful photo here from Iceland, I experienced nature as the most incredible, creative, intelligent power. We grew up also around farms where I was living in the Netherlands, and I loved animals. So I was always among the horses, the cows, the goat, and I noticed that nature speaks, nature communicates. And nature always has a way of reaching out. And I felt much more at home, in fact, in nature and among the animals than I felt among people. I thought that people were really complicated. And that a lot of people would say things they didn't mean, that didn't make any sense to me. And I had a strong intuition ever since I was a little girl, so I could sense what people's intentions were and could see the many inconsistencies. So when I was little, I thought, I'm not so sure about that human world, but the natural world is very clear. If a dog feels threatened, it growls and it lets me know. When the horse is feeling tense, I know it immediately. So I thought it's straightforward. Nature is very honest, and nature picks up also how I feel. It's not so much about what I say. I may say all kinds of nice, fancy words, but I get immediate feedback from nature about how I stand in the world, how I am in life. And so it were all of those experiences that really became the foundation of everything that I'm doing today around how do we create the systems and the cultures and the practices and the ways for architecting a world that can, by design, thrive, that is regenerative. But then also, how do we become the people? And this is where I noticed I've lived in many different countries. I learned a lot from the indigenous people in Africa. I lived for 8 years in Australia. And I was fascinated, especially for the Australian Aborigines, how they really take time to cultivate human consciousness. And you don't just become human by having a formal education. You become human by going through a process of initiation, by going through a rite of passage. And it means you're being tested and you're being challenged to see whether the powers of life are safe in you. What are you going to do with that? How are you going to direct that? And you get tested also to learn how to work with your own desires and that and your own projections. And so that brought me on a long journey of going through the inner transformations as well, to understand also in this process of our developmental process, both personally, culturally, and as a species, how do we become the required people now for this future potential that lives within our heart, for a more beautiful world, a more loving and compassionate world? What is it that we need to go through? And I then dedicated my life to that process, and that's where we are today.
I love it. And your perspective is holistic. So looking at the whole system and addressing both the inner changes that we need to make in the outer. And I love the way you're putting that in context of a test, because where we are right now with everything that's happening, systems crumbling, it's like, okay, we can go into panic mode, or we can rise up. We can rise up to the challenge. And the work that you're doing with the Future Humans Quest is developing tools for us to be able to see things differently. Can you tell us a little bit about those architectural ways of looking at things, or archetypal, and how that changes how we show up?
Yes, my pleasure. So yes, the Future Humans Quest, we're actually beginning with that on the 25th of May with people from around the world. Everyone is welcome. We provide scholarships as well. So there's plenty of opportunities for everyone to participate. But the nature indeed of the Future Humans Quest is about going through the inner changes, but to do that together. And the architectural tools, they feature in our second book of the Future Humans trilogy, The Return of the Avatars. And I'll give you some of the names so you can get a sense of that. For example, the first architect tools is called the Ring of Unity. And what you see in each of the archetypal symbols, they're universal symbols that we find in a lot of the different wisdom traditions from around the world. And in this Ring of Unity, you see that there is one body, which then, as it comes together in the ring, there's the head of a dragon and there's the head of a serpent. And between that is an emerald egg. And the serpent and the dragon, they represent these guardians of these very ancient archetypal forces. And so what is also represented in that ring of unity as a cosmic architect tool is both the masculine and the feminine expression of these very, very ancient primordial creative powers that become activated in the change of eras. And this is important because when one major cycle is coming to completion and there's already the emergence of the new, look, for example, the way that a serpent or a snake is shedding its skin. If we were to look at the serpent that is shedding its skin on its outside, so we're seeing it peeling off. So we could also say, well, what's causing the peeling? Well, it's because a new body is growing inside that serpent already. So right now in the world, although it's often not visible, in the same way that, a lot of the vegetables, like look at your potatoes growing under the soil as well, and the carrots, but there is a new future that is growing already within us. And I'm saying new, I don't mean the arrow of time, like a future from a continuation of the past. When I mean new future, this means that this is the future that's emerging from this new cycle with new orders of possibility that humanity has hardly begun to tap into. But we can see this already emerging also in the response patterns of some of the younger generations, which forms, in fact, part of my Ph.D. research in systems change, to map that out as in terms of 5 new future archetypal patterns. So coming back to that serpent, then we start to see that this new body of consciousness is growing and it's pushing out the old skin. So it's actually causing the peeling. So in some ways, we could also see that perhaps some of this collapse and the breakdown, not all of it, that is that because we have a sustainability crisis. We are in the midst of the greatest sustainability crisis our species has ever caused. But also at the same time, there is also a shift of cycles that are much larger happening. And some of them could even, when we're talking in a planetary and a cosmological perspective, we are part of major cycles that are completing and those that are emerging and beginning. So when we become aware then that there is also this new future body that is starting to form, that also pushes all of the old patterns, old dynamics up to the surface. And you look with that perspective now, for example, of the war in Eastern Europe and the invasion of Ukraine and the behavior of Putin. And so we're seeing in this time also the rise of some very, very harmful, old, dictatorial tendencies. But in some ways, we can also say it's pushed to the surface, coming up right now, because at the same time, there's been an other and a deeper evolutionary process happening of people around the world coming together, experimenting with whole new ways, starting to really architect, the systems and principles and practices. And also there's many of our friends here from Seeds and Haifa. And so in that family, we're working with that all the time to really architect these new ways that make that vision of a thriving world and future possible. So that's just an example when we're working then with that ring of unity. What it helps us to do now is, first of all, to connect with this archetypal power of what the dragon represents and the serpent represents. Now, I've talked now about the serpent, but the dragon in this story, what it represents is our lessons about fire. Almost every problem we see today in the world is because humanity has not completed, or perhaps not even began, to face the lessons of fire, of the alchemy of fire. And if we're looking at violence, we're looking at war, we're looking at global warming, we're looking at so many of those divisions. If you boil that down from an archetypal perspective and an alchemical perspective, then what we're seeing is a misuse of fire. So instead of working with fire for illumination, working with fire for transformation, even the way that, we have a fossil fuel dependent economies rather than working with the beautiful solar power. And so if humanity is starting to learn the lessons of fire and master the power of fire from within us, we stop externalizing also all of those powers through all these different technologies. And so the dragon really represents, therefore, that lesson, that challenge. and to come into balance with this again. If we're looking now, for example, at the mythologies around the dragon in Europe, all these, look at these projections. The dragon has now been made as if it is this cunning beast that likes to lure the virgins into its cave. It likes to hoard onto all the different treasures. Yeah? But if we're looking at the Eastern cultures, we find that there's a whole other aspect of the dragon being really wise. If we go now back a bit further in indigenous European cultures, the dragon before that was really seen also as a guardian of the alchemical fire, of learning the lessons of the higher heart. There's in some of the Buddhistic traditions, the dragons are also the guardians. Yeah, they are for the Buddha wisdom. But what we're seeing in our storytelling, that there's been so many projections around how we are working with those powers within us, and this is where, in these cosmic architectural tools, what we are really learning again is how to come into a direct relationship with these fundamental, transformational, archetypal powers that are inherent within the universe, that are there within life itself, and clear away so many of the projections, and then learn to apply that in a way that helps us to truly manifest this more beautiful future. Another architect tool is a cosmic compass, which has also been used for the design of the seeds constitution. Then there is a cosmic navel cord to reconnect with the three mothers, Mother Cosmos, Mother Universe, and Mother Earth. There is a stone of darkness and light, where you're learning to work with the alchemical powers of both darkness and light, and the feminine and the masculine principles. And rather than seeing darkness as something scary or something bad, to see that the darkness, the sacred darkness, has the qualities of being truly receptive. And that's in a lot of the I would say sometimes more superficial spiritual traditions, people can be over-focused on the light, and again, going out there. But if we're really looking deeper, if we don't know the qualities of the sacred feminine, of the darkness, of the womb, of the receptive, the being able to renew yourself by dreaming through the night, then we're missing a vital element of regeneration. So when I'm using the words regeneration, I don't only mean honoring the planetary boundaries and thresholds and social foundations. When I'm talking about regeneration, it also means that we are in touch with the very powers that make new life possible and bring into balance, therefore, both the masculine, the feminine, the darkness, and the light, and non-gender, of course, as well. And so there are 7 of those tools that help us to come in touch with these primordial powers, which traditionally in many indigenous cultures, that was the whole purpose of an initiation. During an initiation, during a rite of passage, you have a very concentrated and can be quite intense encounter with those forces in such a way that the mental filters fall away. And this is why for people, these experiences can be truly life-changing and for some people daunting even, because our mind creates all these different nice categories in which we are, tend to live a lot of the time. And by so doing, we can be quite disconnected really from the nature of life itself, and from the earth in truly her transformative power. And the process that she's going through right now, another thing that we're learning through these architectural tools, in again, going back to initiations and alchemy, fire is incredibly important. Now, look right now, there is a tremendous amount of heat that is being absorbed by the oceans. Yeah, unbelievable. There is a tremendous amount of heat in the lower atmosphere. From a transformational perspective, from an alchemical perspective, you could also say, look at this fire that normally you would have to create the conditions for during a rite of passage. It's freely available. Why are we not using that really to help transform human consciousness, to truly usher in this next evolutionary step as humanity? But it means, therefore, of course, that people have to befriend those powers again, to get to know about how those powers live in them. And in such a way that when those powers activate within us, that it doesn't get hijacked by the ego or by shadow dynamics, by going back in this very narrow perspective, individualistic or separatist perspective, and truly take that jump to planetary consciousness.
So vast and profound. So what you're talking about is really working with almost the magical, the alchemical, the much deeper layer, the invisible realms, but they are existent. They are part of the architecture of humanity. For many of us, we've been asleep to it. And for those of us who are called to want to step into being those first responders, playing the world game, to be of service, the more we can wrap our consciousness around these energies to be able to work with them consciously, the better. Is that what I'm hearing?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You got it. Because especially now, it's almost like you only have two ways. Either you don't understand those powers and the way it manifests is destructive, or you understand and you work with it in harmony and it becomes creative, generative. Yeah. The earth is going through it because right now Mother Earth has to balance herself under extreme conditions. Her organs are damaged. Even the gravitational fields around the Earth are shifting as there's so much ice that is melting. Yeah? The polar shift is already starting to be in place. Biodiversity loss, then all the increase in temperatures. So Mother Earth, our planet, is going through a major transformation, and she is alive. So she will find ways, she will seek ways to balance herself. And that means that those powers, those very powers, are activated. They're not in a dormant state right now. They are activated. On top of that, when there is death, during death, the portal opens, and those powers also then become more activated. That's the power of the imaginal in our world. So when we are in this transition period, it's just like, a lot of the women who've given birth, and it's been my experience as a mother, when you give birth, when the birth canal starts to open, it's like you see life from two perspectives. You're giving birth, you're bringing a new being into the world, and at the same time, it's like you're looking on the other side. The portal between death and new life and birth. In that, for me at least, in giving birth, it was like one continuum. There's a new being coming in, but as it's coming in, where's it coming from? So it's dying to an old experience as it's entering into the new. And so this process of this activation now of portals opening, Susan and Walter are the guardians of a major portal there, right? So you understand this about portals. So portals are opening, and that means there's an influx of transformative power. But when there is that influx, if that gets hijacked by people like Putin and other dictators, and they want to use that power now to continue the game of domination, then we're really, really wasting major transformative opportunities right now. So this is definitely time for people to wake up and understand how to work with these powers.
So true. I want to open it up for dialogue and conversation in a moment. You mentioned seeds a couple of times. Many of us in this room are aware of seeds. I want to just do a quick introduction to those who may not be. Seeds is a regenerative currency. It is money that is aligned with values, and the seeds community values people and planet. And it is forming. Many people in this room are on the leadership committee, and Dr. Smitsman co-authored and was very instrumental in the development of the Constitution. And the Seeds Constitution, one of us can probably put it in the chat for people
I'll put it in the chat.
Thank you. It's a constitution that if the world adopted, it would be a much better place. It has these core foundational principles that are based on a whole systems perspective. And that's something that KINS has been about, that we recognize that where we are in the evolution of our planet, it is not a simple solution. It is not that there's one thing that's going to fix it. It is a systemic issue, and the realization that something new is already existing, being birthed, and our role is to help work with those energies, to help work with nature and allow that new life to come forward using these tools is kind of what we're talking about. So
Yeah,
Yes.
just to say one more thing about it. Many constitutional scholars that have read this Constitution are now saying that this is the single best Constitution ever written on the earth, and that you would be hard pressed, even looking at the U.S. Constitution, to find a better, more comprehensive Constitution that serves all humanity than this document, which was the subject of 7 different constitutional conventions within the SEEDS environment before it was adopted by the people of the SEEDS ecosystem. I put it in the chat, so you can, if you want to see it, you just click on the link there and you'll get the PDF file.
And in our upcoming events, next week, we are having Walter and Sid talk about some of the Eco Village projects that they're using and that SEEDS is involved in. And then in 2 weeks, Mark Epstein, who is in the room here, and members of the SEEDS Commons, many of whom are in the room, are going to be doing a presentation about SEEDS. So we encourage you to get to know it a little bit better through Kinship Earth. So with that, I'd like to open it up to reflections on what Dr. Smitsman has shared, or I know she goes by Anneloes, but I like to call her Dr.
Yeah, just say Anneloes is fine.
Because you're just so well educated. You just got the whole piece. So anyway, yeah.
Thank you. It's very kind of you.
So if you look down at the bottom of your Zoom screen, there is a button for reactions. And if you click on that, underneath there, it says raise hand. So if you raise your hand, then it will put you in a queue and I will see. And feel free to join the conversation. Stephen.
Well, I just want to add something, personal background about my interaction with Anneloes. 2 things. One, I did meet her on the Talking Circle, which was an indigenous talking circle course taught by Phil Lane right here in Seattle. So that's where I met her. And that's a wonderful course, by the way. And she was my teacher. So that's how I met her. It was wonderful getting to know her there. The other thing is we crossed paths. I was teaching Ph.D. and master's degree students in the MBA program at the University of Maastricht in Holland. The whole time she was there, same time, getting her PhD. Our paths never crossed. I wish they would have, but we were there at the same time. And I know the environment. I had my bicycle there, bicycled all around Maastricht. Beautiful, beautiful little castle town, by the way. Never was bombed during the war. And all the little narrow streets and all the little buildings. Really beautiful little place. Close to where Limburger cheese comes from, by the way.
Yes. Thank you, Stephen.
Well, while we're waiting for another question, one of the things that, again, really struck me about Anneloes' TED Talk, and I sent that out in the last email. I can pop a link in the chat to that. But this notion of what we bring, that our energy, we've heard the phrase, where attention goes, energy flows. And what we are focusing on here is solutions. We are focusing on emergence of a regenerative system. We are putting our energy on that. And so to come from that place inside of us where we are choosing to bring love and hope and dedication and commitment, that is a very important piece of the work here. And so I know most of the people in this room, that's how we all live, how we all come from, but just reinforcing that as part of the architecture. And you are able, you deliver that message so clearly. So thank you.
Thank you, Laura. And maybe for those who haven't watched it, in the TED Talk, it's about how do you become a vector of love rather than a vector of destruction. And so a vector has 3 elements. So there's 3 questions that I go through in the TED Talk. And you have a point of origin. The vector always has a point of origin. So the question there is, what is your point of origin? Is it the unity of life? Is it our common foundations? Is it understanding that we're all rooted in the same life? Yeah. Or is your point of origin only, your own narrow objectives of what you really want to achieve? So know your point of origin. That's the first one. A vector also, it has reach. So the reach is both in terms of in and outer, as Lauren just explained. So that's in that question, when you're looking at your reach, is how far inside can you reach? And when you reach inside, what are you reaching for? Are you reaching for love? Are you reaching for generosity? So they're coming back to the Kin's principles as well, right? And then how far does your reach go out? Who are you reaching for? Yeah? How are you connecting with other people? And so that's about the reach. And then the vector also has a direction, has somewhere that it's pointing to. So that is about, what am I directing my vector to? What am I pointing to? What am I focusing on? Because that's what I help to grow. Those three questions: your point of origin, your reach inside and outside, and your direction. Those three together determine your impact in the world and how also you are impacted by what is happening.
Well, Anneloes, I'll thank you. I've never had a chance to thank you in person earlier because I didn't know you existed, and I was caught in a real complete breakdown in my life because I wanted to go into finance, to have finance reconstruct the world and honor the world instead of destroying it. And this is back in 1964 after I graduated from Brown. And I had no supporters. It was all, money, money, money. And everyone I knew told me that I was crazy. Like, what makes you think you can, why are you thinking that way? What's wrong with you? And so I realized I was not getting any support, and I just withdrew. And it didn't take me that long. Within 4 or 5 years, I had found other people in finance with credentials who agreed with me that our strategy is generosity. In finance, it has to be that our strategy is generosity because it's Earth that supports us, and we got to stop raping her. We've got to start supporting her. So it took me quite a while, probably about 10 years or so, to find other people with credentials in finance that believe as I did. And we started creating these networks that were, the purpose of which were to restore Earth. And it's been very successful. We've done 40 networks along that line over the last 40 years. And finally now we have a contingent. We are organized. We are making success. And only the people that are supporting Earth now are thriving. That's it. So we're being supported by all life. So God bless you. We didn't know you. We couldn't thank you. We couldn't support you. And now you've done it. We're together. And God bless us all.
That's it. Thank you so much, Susan. Yes.
Thank you, Susan. Yes. And I see Pete has his hand up and Hank has his hand up. So Pete.
Yeah, so this is just so beautiful. Everybody who's participating here and making a real difference in the world. And I think a really key piece of this is to reach out. I think humanity is longing for something new, something different, and they just need to be made aware that there is something new and different happening, and people are involved in this and reaching out. And the key piece in this is going to be inclusiveness. Every single human being has something they can do to make the world a better place. And whatever that gift is, probably associated with their highest purpose. So when we let this field that we're creating consciousness for humanity, it's reaching out with our hands and saying, what is your gift? What can you contribute? And that's how they're brought into the human family, to this circle of humanity as a human tribe, rather than all these separate tribes who are polarized against each other. This is how we become one with one another. And just bless you all for being part of this. Thank you.
God bless you.
Thanks, Pete. Yes, wisdom. It's like that indigenous wisdom where we're all part of a circle. Every voice matters. That is another one of the Kin's principles, is that everyone gets equal time. So, and is respected at equal levels. Hank, love to hear your voice in the circle this morning.
I'd be unmuted. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, good. I'm deeply appreciative of the powerful insight around the pulse between the light and the dark. We forget that the absence of something is so valuable. It makes you, without the absence of something, it's very hard to appreciate the something.
Exactly.
And I have had such an adventure. Yesterday, Susan, you would appreciate that yesterday, Amory and Stephen and George and I were working with a power broker who has the UAE and Thailand's dictatorship all engaged in a massive proposed city, a new so-called smart city.
Oh my God.
It's very well, there is the power of that idea, but then there was also the question that the power broker had not actually asked, which George and I had talked about carefully in advance, and Amory presented in the course of the conversation, which was when the fellow with the giant contractor and all the connections suggested that nothing had been there in Thailand, which is kind of hard to believe, 15 square miles, that there was actually nothing there. I think Walter will roll his eyes when he hears I went on and did a little search. Well, there were 5,300 small farmers who had been there until 2018. So a smart city, what I'm trying to illustrate is that the absence of something has to be weighed in the context of all these brilliant, beautiful things that we'd like to do. There is the light and there is the dark. And I think that our economy and the vision of the seed that we've been, and the square meal system, where an hour of work would be actually worth a square meal, which is a pretty fundamental idea. And it takes seeds to produce square meals. That simplicity and generosity and attention to your place and your effect on everybody is quite outside the money system. It's really not a dollar deal that we're doing here. It's a caring deal that we're doing. And in many ways, not doing something is profoundly more valuable than doing something. But if you explain that to your banker, hang on a second. Sorry about that. If you explain that to your banker, they say, well, how are you going to pay your mortgage? So our interest here is in creating a market for things that don't happen. And Lauren and Susan and the team have graciously asked me to talk about that in June, and we're structuring a way of talking about that. But basically, a business partnership with future generations is not a dollar deal. It's not a dollar deal. It's a whole different kind of value creation. You have to use dollars, of course. But anyway, so I'm celebrating the darkness. Thank you for making sure I was in the conversation.
That's wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you, Hank. All right. So George and then Dr. Carmen, and then we will pause and reevaluate. I've got a couple of announcements for upcoming events and things, and then we'll see how the time goes. I know it's late in Mauritius where Anneloes is, so we'll see how we may need to cut her off a little early. But George, let's hear from you.
Thanks, Anneloes. Thanks, everyone. I just wanted to bring up that, we have an issue with Putin in that we've got all of humanity on this planet, and we're watching what he's doing to the planet, and we're kind of standing by and allowing this continued damage to the ecosystem to occur. And I wanted to ask, what would be the most efficient way to empower humanity to be able to stand up for these environmental injustices as they're taking place now that we're informed as a global community? Because overall, there's just a few people that are making decisions that are ruining this planet for all. And it's time to, collectively take them to task.
Yes.
Well, and you mentioned the archetype of domination, Anneloes, in your work. And so as Putin represents that, so I don't know if you can give us a quick answer to that.
Yeah, well, the quickest is probably to read Return of the Advertisement. Because so there's a lot of strategies that are laid out in the book, but it indeed begins by you've got to understand how these archetypes operate within ourselves and within these patterns. Because even if we say that we deal with Putin and his behavior, if we're doing that in another form, that we are acting out of that archetype of domination, we just become the next dominator. And so there's no evolution in that process. And this is what humanity keeps doing. So it's not about what Putin represents. What are the power structures around that have allowed this to happen, to come to this point? And we have to, everyone, all the different nations and countries have to really get honest about that, and honest about the real transactions underneath that at all. In my Ph.D. research into the heart of systems change, I was working basically on what are the systemic barriers that are preventing us from coming together and for truly resolving the issues that we know intellectually, we know it in our heart. And yet we're not taking the actions where that's really needed. And we need to understand those systemic barriers, because they are a direct result of the systemic archetypes underneath that. So when I work with archetypes, I don't just work with archetypes in the way that people may know it in the Jungian system or in a mythological sense. An archetype for me is about knowing what are the deepest structures of a system. So what is the relationship between the various interconnections, various elements of the system? What's the purpose that has been assigned to that system? And is that system evolutionary by design? Is it rooted within the deeper informational architecture of the universe itself? Because those have very distinct patterns. And if not, then why? Because if a system is not rooted within this deeper informational dynamics of the evolutionary process, it cannot renew, it cannot transform, and it will become destructive, especially when it's scaled. And this is what we are. People like Putin, to me, are a huge mirror for seeing the end of a certain pattern and way of thinking and behaving. That's been part of our story for a very, very long time.
That's one of the reasons I like the language of the regenerative renaissance, because when we look at the language of revolution, it's that notion of one dominant system, and then we revolve to another dominant system, and then we're just going back and forth with revolution. But a renaissance is a rebirth. It's something new coming forward. And so
Exactly.
the language around that is important. Okay, let's hear from Dr. Carmen briefly, and then I'm going to do a couple of announcements, and then I'd love to give each person who has not had a chance to speak just a moment to put their voice in the room and do a key takeaway or a closing affirmation.
And Lauren, just quickly, I'm happy to stay a bit longer if there are good conversations here. So wherever value can be brought, I'm always there. Yeah.
Great. Sounds good. Yes, we had promised about 90 minutes with partial presentation and then time for, because it's just so valuable to be able to.
It's all together here.
Yes. Yeah. Okay, Dr. Carmen, welcome. And Dr. Carmen is in Ecuador, and I believe you'll need to unmute yourself.
Thank you, Lauren, Susan, Walter, Stephen, and of course, Dr. Smitsman. It's been a pleasure to share with you today and to get to know all of you. Yes, I am in Ecuador, about 5 hours away from the sacred farm. So what my question is, if you were, and I put it in the chat, if Dr. Smitsman, if you were talking to a group of about 100, 200, 500 top MBA students just about to graduate from a top business school in the United States, specifically Harvard, Stanford, Chicago, Wharton comes to mind, Columbia, what would you say, regarding future human quest and the businesses that they are about to create as they come out into the world as young, people full of hope and possibility?
I love that. And actually, there's in one of the leading books on economics, Thrive, Foundations for a New Economy, that was published in the Netherlands for the business schools there. It contributed one of the chapters, which is about understanding economies of life. So coming from the cosmology of living systems and that information architecture again, and then applying that to economic systems. So understanding therefore also complexity economics. So what I would say to all of these students, first of all, saying, okay, you've come to the end here of your time at university, and now you're being prepared, right, to be an architect for the future. So let's go back to the basics. First step, you got to start with the universe. So know how you need to be partnering life. Yeah. If we don't start with the universe first, and you start to only design and architect from all this knowledge that's here in your head and everything that you've learned for all of those exams, you may be, with the best of intentions, be joining the group of humans who have, with the best of intentions, some of the worst designs that we're seeing. So understand, first of all, how does a universe grow? How does it from its growth develop? How from its developmental process does it then evolve? And therefore, what do we need to understand? Thank you. What do we need to understand about economics now as a complex living system? So in one of the questions that I asked in this book chapter is, I would like you to now get to know the economy in which you spent a lot of time as a person. And if you were to meet this person now, so I would say to the students, okay, so you're going to go out, and for those systems, economic systems you were about to design or start to lecture on, I'd like you to meet your system now as a person. And if you were to meet your system, would you trust that system? Do you feel honored by that system? Do you feel valued? Do you feel at home? Would you say this system is a great friend of mine? And if not, then why? And go back to the design table. Because I feel that what's been the problem with a lot of these educational systems is that they've been holding it at such a complex level, but no longer sensing and feeling the very dynamics that we are creating. Go back also by understanding algorithms. And then, and this will be the biggest challenge to leave them with if you want to be a future human. So what's the characteristics of future humans? Future humans, in times of challenges and breakdown, they get really creative. They come up with new responses. They partner life in the evolutionary process. And it's these very new responses by seeking and creating and becoming the conditions for whole new possibilities that we give birth to these new futures. So I would ask them as well, what future possibility is living in you? How are you going to be true to that? How can you be a good future ancestor? Think of the work you're doing now. And if you were to now put it in a long perspective, and you were to be seeing that from 100 years from now, what are the conditions that you would have wanted to really contribute to? And ask yourself, what is it that you need to let go of so that you can become more open and receptive to this intelligence of our earth, of living systems, of these myriads, of all these different beings, bacteria, viruses. I mean, there are so many fascinating evolutionary patterns on this planet that we can learn from. How can we become like a fungi? How there is already an underground web. How do we become like that? What can we learn from slime mold? What can we learn from nature herself in being able to co-create an economy that by design is capable to learn, is capable to develop in an evolutionary way, is capable even at larger scales to become part of the larger evolutionary process that helps humanity make the jump from local or national consciousness to planetary consciousness. And an economy that then by design is rooted within the very architect of the universe itself, so that its complexity is evolutionary coherent and not what we're having now, that the complexity is destructive. So that would be what I would want to give to these.
Thank you, bravo. Thank you very much.
What a beautiful beautiful question. I love it.
It's a great question.
And so before we move on, as promised, I want to do a couple of quick announcements. So I put in the chat the link to Anneloes' upcoming quest called the Future Humans Quest. It starts on May 25th. It will be an opportunity to really dive deep into her 7 cosmic architect tools. And early bird registration is through the 10th of May. So you'll want to jump on that. And I'm sure you can reach out with any questions. And we've been doing our connections. What I want to do before we close is, again, for those people we have not heard from yet, I want to hear at least a word or two. Before we do that, just want to let you guys know we are building our video library with KINS Network members. So the video recording of Stuart Valentine's presentation is up in our library. And there's also an interview I did with Heather Booth, who is an organizer for people who want to organize movements. And she's got some brilliant ways of thinking about movements and organizations and strategy. So really worth watching, as well as my interview with Frank Dixon, who is also a systems thinker and has written extensively on global systems change. He's delightful to listen to, very clear in his concepts. Upcoming events. Next week, Tuesday, 1 o'clock Pacific, 4 o'clock Eastern, we're going to be having a presentation on regenerative eco-village pilot projects. So both Sid and Walter and Susan, of course, are involved in this alliance of regenerative eco-villages that are place-based. And we're going to be working together within the SEEDS community to develop alliances and to learn from one another and really grow as communities in how we work with nature and biomimicry and some of these cosmic architecture tools. So please join us for that. And then the following week, we're going to really dive more deeply into the SEEDS ecosystem. Mark and other members of the SEEDS Commons, Joaquim, who is in the room here, I think is going to be joining us, who has built the tools. Haifa has built the tools for SEEDS. So we're going to be learning about that and finding out how we can get involved. So now what I want to do is open it up, and we've only got about 15 minutes. And so I do want to prioritize. I see, Stephen, I see your hand up. So if you can be very brief, I really want to prioritize hearing from some of those folks that we have not heard from yet. So let's.
Very quickly, I just wanted to respond to Dr. Carmen Delia Ortiz's question more. I'm an MBA professor. I teach all over the world in MBA programs. Currently, I'm not teaching, but your question is very apt. What I would say is, and more deeply to answer your question, is that the system that we have now of economics is a system that came from the male dominance model, if you will. If you look at the indigenous models of economics, you'll see a very, very different model of economics, which is much more centered on nature and centered on collaboration. So basically, to me, the answer is to empower women. You empower women in the world, you will change economics. By definition, you will change economics. And you will have a more fundamentally sound, more equitable, more generous form of economics. And that's what's happening in the world anyway, because another thing you can point out to your students is this system is clearly demonstrably not sustainable. It can be proven. It will, in fact, not sustain itself. It'll be painful, but it's not going to go forward. So the best thing to do is what Buckminster Fuller said, create an alternative and let the new model replace the old model. Don't worry about attacking the old model. Just create something better and people will follow. So I
That
just,
is
Hallelujah.
exactly what she is doing in Ecuador. Dr. Carmen and her partner, Blanca, are creating a spiritual, ethical, entrepreneurial program. And she's got some great work that she's doing. So I look forward to folding her work into this community. So awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. So Kenneth and Abigail, nice to hear from you. Welcome back. Well, Kenneth, welcome back. Abigail, nice to meet you.
So my name is Abigail. I just want to say I am so deeply grateful for everything that you shared. And I have a deep love for the animals and feel very connected to them and feel them in their physical presence on earth, but also their spiritual presence and the spiritual power that they hold, and like them allying with us to remember that interconnectedness and to support us and to support them. And I really loved the dragon and the serpent and working with that animal symbology to support the understanding and the working through these initiations. And it really, it just felt so powerful too, the initiation of fire and these greater forces, like rather than thinking of climate change as just the destruction, it as actually the opportunity. And it felt so empowering and like this inclusion and belonging to the greater spiral of what's actually happening that we can participate in. So yeah, I felt so much resonance and just so incredibly grateful to receive this and to be here.
Awesome. Thank you. Kenneth, are you going to join in, say a few words?
I'd love to. I'm challenged in this moment to access words. I'm having like a full body experience and appreciating the just being in this space and the shared intelligence in this collective nervous system that's assembled on this call today. And I experienced this in the last call, and I'm excited to continue to experience this as I continue to weave into this in these circles, but really just appreciating and honoring and acknowledging the profound upgrades and transformations that can happen simply by being in a circle of like-minded individuals. And I really love the word earthlings, where my experience today was like receiving a highly potent, highly like catalyzing transmission and just sitting back and letting it work me. And I'm deeply grateful for that. And I can literally feel my nervous system being worked right now. And I've had tears flowing at different points and just sitting and receiving the medicine of this group. And I feel grateful to life that life has brought me here. And I'm grateful to each of you for being in this collective space of co-regulation and service to the earth today.
Thank you. And I love your language, the way that you're describing what's actually happening here, the weaving together of energies and the collective intelligence that is part of the whole notion that it's a circle of squares, as Sharon Joy in Florida says, but we are very much in a circle. So thank you for being here and for sharing. We haven't heard from John, from Walter, from Jeanette, from Joaquin, from the other John, Fiona, Manu, just opening up if you want to say a word or two. Mark's got his hand up.
I just wanted to add one thing. It felt like when we were hearing about the light and the absence of light, and what Kenneth was just saying is, when I was little, there was just a lot of space for nothing. We were bored sometimes, like a lot. And there's a lot of space for that, and that's where I'm just feeling at this point, like a space of not taking, not needing. I don't know. It feels like messages come from a space of boredom, and that we are all so filled up. Our world has become so filled up because of, things like this. It fills up the space so that there just isn't as much boredom. And I think a lot of the great things in my life happened in moments of boredom.
Love that. Yes, beautiful. That reminds me, I'm going to do a very quick screen share here. In the KINS Network Guidebook, let's see if I can make this bigger. I share a graphic that, again, I really align with Anneloes' thinking about architecture, because so much of the Western world has prioritized this left brain. When we set goals and when we focus on values and what's important, we focus on the masculine, the hierarchical, the objective, the linear, the outer. And yet the right brain, this is what, if we're not focusing on this, this is what's going to pull us off track. And so this is our opportunity now, is to get into the feminine, the darkness, the collaborative, the circular. And so it's just another model of how to think about this. And this is in the KINS Network Playbook, which you should have all gotten a copy of. So Walter. Oh, feel free to unmute yourself.
Okay, so Anneloes, thanks for bringing up the whole dark side that we hear about so much, but you put it a little bit more positively. I know, we're very lucky being here on this farm. And when I go outside, I try to do at least once a day and just be in the sunshine. The positive energies that are coming in. It's like I can end up just feeling good and being happy, despite this deep. I know I also have this deep sadness about the earth and what's happening with humanity, but. What I have to remind myself is that the light actually, well, in my way of thinking of it is, it doesn't have a ready-made script. We're in the process of writing the script. We're creating our world, and it's. I can't see the other end, but I do believe in metamorphoses and miracles. So I just wanted to share that.
Love that. So working with that principle of the unknown and allowing emergence to realize that we're part of a living system. And so we can't know, like we literally cannot know, but we can hold space for it. Although with Anneloes' work, it's really connecting with the future and inviting in a particular potential. So working with the observer effect and fields of potentials and quantum reality. All right, John, you have your hand up. Thanks for joining us today.
Sure. I really appreciate all of the sharing that's been going on today. My interest is in conscious evolution, and it's been kind of fascinating. I used it in my work environment as a manager, and I've been trying to promote that. Einstein suggested it was a critical factor for humanity. Buckminster Fuller said the same thing. That we really need to have a conscious evolution. And one of the things I thought about when you spoke of Heather Booth, in my small world, I have been kind of lumbering along trying to figure out how to help other people facilitate this conscious evolution process. So I'm just going to be listening and see what the universe brings. But it is something I think is critical for all of us, and I'm on this perpetual journey of conscious evolution. there is no end. It's just always a new and exciting experience.
John, please feel free to put your link in the chat. John writes a daily on the global era of love. So just a little quote of the day and just a little inspirational thought. And it's all about conscious evolution. And so that's why I wanted to invite him to this group, because I knew like his voice was just part of the choir. So thank you for being with us. Okay, so let's see, who haven't we heard from? So it's optional. I don't want to push people if you don't want to share. It's fine, but I want to. I'm seeing John Love taking his camera off, and Joaquin has his hand up. Joaquin, go ahead. Why don't you start?
Yeah, thank you, Lauren, and thank you, Anneloes, for that beautiful presentation. So for me, I'm from Haifa, so for me, this is bringing in sort of a technology perspective, what's possible from that end towards sort of the human ecological perspective, right? How do you merge these two together? And interestingly, this is the exact time for me where this becomes possible. On the internet, it's kind of every 20 years there's a major transition happening, a phase shift, really, right? And with Web 1, Web 2, and Web 3, that's the third phase shift we're going through now, where everything inverts again, and it's more about the people, it's more about the communities, it's more about what we can do in a much more decentralized way, creating these new beautiful patterns, right? So it's all supportive of this idea that we're here together to make these collective decisions. And it's another important thing for me is that it's a collective approach, right? It can't be just individuals, thinking about themselves and seeing what the problems are. It's coming together, boarding these vessels, creating these DAOs, whatever it is, and then going out and make change, make the impact that we want to see in the world. And that's what we're here for. So again, thank you so much for this discussion. Thank you.
Well, thank you for creating these tools that are going to allow us to step into that next level. And I, for one, am looking forward to learning more about Haifa tools and then exploring how we can set up communities within Haifa as kins groups to collaborate. So very exciting, much to learn. Okay, John.
I just wanted to say thank you very much to everybody who's here, and Anneloes for the beautiful presentation. It's wonderful to get these kins networks connected so that we can have a broader community supporting each other in this endeavor. And as Stephen said, the current order is not going to last. It's unsustainable. So let's get together and create what's next.
So true. And it is a daunting task, which was one of Susan's early requirements for creating a mission. Make it daunting. It's like there's nothing less daunting than the fate of humanity. We know that nature's going to survive, but we may not. And George always says our greatest risk is to think too small. So we are coming together to create something wonderful and magical. Manu, Jeanette, Fiona, anybody want to just say a quick word? If not, that's fine.
I will. So the thing I enjoyed most today, takeaway, was becoming good ancestors. I love that, and I just think that's awesome. But speaking to the dark and the light, I remember reading, this was a long time ago, kind of a little description, and they were talking about a battery has a positive and a negative charge, and that you need both of those in order for it to work. Yes. And so I think it's a matter of how we react and use the dark. And Lauren, you had spoken to how it's like one power turns over to another power, and it's just the same thing. And there's been so much talk about the emergence of something new, and humans, they only know what they've been experiencing, and they don't even have it within their realm of thought that they can do something different than what is the normal reaction. And so it's just so heartwarming to me that these conversations that we're having of ways that it can be accomplished, and that we can then involve more and more of humanity, and they'll go, wow, a light bulb will go off. And who wouldn't choose something better than what's going on right now, in my opinion, anyway. So thank you, everyone, for all your contributions.
Well spoken. And that is one of the intentions of what we're doing here, is cross-pollinating ideas, influence, impact. Every one of us is an influencer. And as these ideas become repeated and embedded in our community and in our architecture of how we show up, then we have that ripple effect. And that is, you can't underestimate the impact each one of us sharing within our own communities. So thank you. We are coming up on the bottom of the hour. Let's see, anyone else that hasn't spoken that wants to? Okay, I'm going to do a quick screen share again. Let me come back to this. So coming soon, I mentioned HIFA, so that is on our list as well as working with some decentralized autonomous organizational tools. Also, we're going to be working with the Open Impact platform. And so just put that in the back of your mind. Down the road, there's going to be opportunities to share information. In the meantime, if you're on social media, please follow us. LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram is where we are. And I'd like to invite Susan and Walter, if you'd like to join her, to sing us out with the We Are Here song.
Okay. Walter, come on in if you want to do that.
I'll go into the other room.
Okay. Sounds good. This is something that Susan and Walter have been holding space for with this beautiful chant. And I would invite all of us to sing, but unfortunately with Zoom, it doesn't work real well, and it ends up cutting out the host singer. So we're going to let Susan and Walter take it away. And in the meantime, remember, Dr. Anneloes Smitsman has the course coming up starting on May 25th. And please feel free to email me directly with questions, comments, suggestions for improvement, and or requests for how you would like to engage more with this community. Okay, Susan and Walter.
Can you bring us up?
Can you see the screen? Or okay, yes,
okay,
I can.
That's good.
Yeah, I can.
Oh, okay, I see.
Oh, let me spotlight you then. Hang on. There we go. Okay.
Ready?
Yeah.
We are here. We are here. Keepers of the garden. We are here. When, if not now, where, if not here, who, if not you and me? We are here. We are here. Keepers of the garden. We are here.
Woo! Woo! Thank you all. Feel free to unmute yourself. We will be back next week, Tuesday, with another Kinship Earth Connections opportunity. We're going to be really focusing on place-based eco-village projects. Thank you all for joining us, and we look forward to staying in touch. Thank you, Dr. Smitsman.
Thank you so much, all. Thank you, Lauren, for the amazing facilitation. Thank you, everyone here.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for joining us for today's Kinship Earth Connections event. To learn more about Dr. Anneloes Smitsman's work, visit earthwisecenter.org. We encourage you to like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel. To learn more and get involved, please visit us at kinshipearth.org.